Hey there guys, DMO73 here, bringing you a feature match between myself and Paul. It's good to have him back on the channel. I am playing a blue-black vampires list, piloted, led by Reiya from the structure deck, and Paul is playing a red-black Dark Elves list led by Frayla. So we thought these two would kind of go well together, vampires versus Dark Elves, as well as two different kind of ways that darkness gets supported by two different colors based on the ruler. So we'll have to see how it goes. I think you guys are definitely going to like this feature match. So I'm going to be on the draw, so I'll start with one mystery counter and the energize. Deciding what I'm going to mulligan here. Paul was a little bit faster on the uptake than I was. I apologize for any shakiness of the camera. We tried to minimize it as much as possible. We had to use kind of an alternative rig today. On his first turn, he gets that Scorched Bales, plays that Shade Assassin. Shade Assassin, and pokes me for 2. My turn, I go down to 38.5 by hitting that Remains of Atarakti, a blue-black stone. Deciding what I want to do with it. So I can probably do an energize like this. Yeah, I'm debating whether to play a turn 1 play or do a kind of energize into a 2-drop. I'll play the Abdul. The Dark Elf deck likes to have enter effects, especially with Hilda and Safina. So playing the Abdul early and kind of forcing him to have to deal with it, it can be pretty helpful in the sense that he can't really play those Dark Elves on board until he's ready until he wastes some time trying to kill the Abdul. He swings in with the Shade Assassin. I'm going to go ahead and just take it, and then he plays his own Abdul, so now neither of us are going to get enter effects. Conveniently for me, though, my deck doesn't really rely on enter effects very much. I don't think I have any in the main board except for Mikage. So I'll call for stone, hit that stone to the Mysterious Castle, get a mystery counter, go up to 2. Immediately spend the one that I just gained with Blood Spray to draw 2. I'll ping myself for 3 damage, and then I'll kill that Abdul. So a lot of card value off of that. Reiya makes really good use of Blood Spray, keeps your hand really full, which is excellent for the deck, especially since it has lots of spot removal and stuff like that, while also killing something at the same time, so you don't have to worry about wasting your time there. Plays the Nameless Mist, sees that my hand is double Rinka, double Charlottes, Power Absorption, Castle of Oni, and Endless Night. He picks the Power Absorption. Reason why is because he doesn't want my vampires to be able to get that bonus and deal additional damage. Stick on board and then do additional damage with it. Gets the 1/1 counter on Shade Assassin, then chooses not to attack. Not necessarily sure why he didn't just go ahead and poke there, but I think it works out fine either way. I'll play the Rinka. I've got the Charlottes to back it up, which is really nice. But then, unfortunately, he has that Dark Purge, which will immediately kill her. And I have no way to get a counter on her at instant speed. Calling for a stone, hits another Scorched Bales. See, he's got Thunder and, 2 Lightning Strikes and a, Crimson Sanction in there. He uses it for burn. It's also to deal with bigger creatures. He swings in with the Shade Assassin. I'll try to make it a 4/4 instead of a 3/3 and try to block with Abdul. And then he spends one of his Lightning Strikes on Abdul to make it a trade, in a sense, which is fine for me. I made him use a Lightning Strike, and I still get to use Charlotte's Water Transformation Magic later. And I got that Shade Assassin off the board. He did pay 300 life at the end of the turn to bring it back into his hand, but again, then he has to spend the time to play it. I'll go ahead and cast the Castle of Oni now because I have access to the Charlottes, so if he tries to play Shade Assassin again, I can just use the Charlotte's Water Transformation Magic to stop it from having swiftness. The other reason why Castle of Oni here is good is because now my Rinkas will come in as 8/8s, so they're harder to kill, as well as all of my other darkness creatures, and if I do flip over Reiya, she'll be a 14/14, which is very, very strong. And I place the Shade Assassin, and I go, you know what, I'm just going to take it. I'll take the 2 damage, it's fine. And then he passes the turn. I'll play a Flute's Water Dragon, which is a kind of pretty important card in this deck because it lets you get mystery counters insanely fast. I'll go up to 3. I start to put it up to 3, and then you see the die slips in my hand and leaves it at 5. Unfortunately, I don't catch it in this match. It's not really relevant because I don't spend too many of them, but that is definitely something for people to keep track of, is making sure that your dice are on the right side. So I should only have 3 mystery counters and not 5. I play that Rinka as well, so she'll come in as an 8/8, which is excellent for me. He just uses Heteroclite Excalibur, however, and just immediately kills her, so it didn't even matter. He'll take the 5 from it, because there's no way I can deal with it. I'll swing in with the Shade Assassin. I'll use my other blue source to cast Charlotte's Water Transformation Magic. I should be casting the one for my grave, but he knows that I have the second one in hand, so it's kind of irrelevant. And again, he uses the Lightning Strike so that it at least turns into a trade, which is fine for me. I don't really lose a spell because I have the Charlotte that I can use again, and he 1-for-1 with the creature, so he technically went -1 there. Calls a stone, hits an Ebon home, pays 300 life, makes me exile a card, which kind of sucked, because it was Sword of the New Moon, which is excellent in this deck, and against his deck, there's nothing really he has that costs more than 4, so Sword of the New Moon just becomes 1-drop instant speed kill anything. He plays that Dark Red Riding Hood, and at the end of the turn, he's going to go ahead and pay the 300 life to get the Shade Assassin back, so he's been really recycling that Shade Assassin pretty well. So he gets that Blood Spray in hand to possibly refill his hand. I'm going to use Castlevania here. I'm going to bring back the Rinka to my hand, so I at least have a vampire here. As again, I've been having to play pretty defensively. Thankfully, he's been kind of pinging himself with the Ebon homes and the paying for life off of Frayla, so he's kind of doing my work for me, which is nice. But I still need to start putting some pressure on the board, so I'll play that Rinka. Hoping that maybe I can get it to survive. He's already used the Heteroclite Excalibur and 2 Lightning Strikes. I'm kind of hoping that maybe he doesn't have any other ways to be able to deal with it. Fortunately, I am wrong because he has a Crimson Sanction, which is unsealed and will do 8 damage to her, immediately killing her. It's also important to note that neither of these decks are playing Severing Winds, so just be aware of that. When he tries to swing in with the Dark Red Riding Hood, I'll use that Endless Night that I have been holding on to. The reason why I'm using it here is because I know at this point, probably the only creature in his hand is Shade Assassin, so playing the Endless Night now means that if he tries to play the Shade Assassin this turn, it'll just immediately get killed. Unfortunately, he does have a Safina, so he gets to bring a Hilda to his hand, and he could play it this turn if he wants. So the Endless Night play didn't work nearly as well as I thought it would. If Shade Assassin had been the only card in his hand, then that Endless Night would have been excellent because it would have bought me an entire turn with his board being clear, so I could focus on establishing my board presence without having to worry about removing his. Hits that Ebon home, pays down another 3 life to keep it untapped. Unfortunately, I exile my other Castlevania. I'm going to use Spinning Aquasoul at the end of the turn to bring back the Endless Night to my hand. This is a pretty important spell against Dark Elves, being able to kind of board wipe and reduce the damage, especially since he's dealing with those Shade Assassins. So I tap incorrectly there. I should tap for blue. I don't know why I tapped a black there. So catching that now. I guess it doesn't really matter there because I just do it, backwards. So those stones are just incorrect. Again, here I should be only at 6 counters and not 8. But again, it doesn't really matter. So pardon the bad, incorrect stone placement there. Thankfully, I end up exactly where I should be in terms of 3 blue-black sources, regardless of which order I tapped those in after calling for stone. I did pay the 300 for the remains, though, because I need access to that Endless Night. So at this point, I'm feeling pretty confident. My Reiya is big enough to be able to deal with his Frayla. My Reiya can also tap to kill something at instant speed. I have the Endless Night to be able to do a pseudo board wipe. There's lots of different things that I can do here. And I am up on life, which is nice. Plays that Shade Assassin back out. Deciding which order he wants to kind of swing in here. It's going to poke me for 2, which I'm like, yeah, sure, that's fine. I can take the 2. I'll go down to 25 or 22. Swings in for the 5 with Safina. I'll go down to 18. So here's the thing. So Paul did the right thing there in the sense that he played these cards and then tried to poke to try to bait out the Endless Night or the Reiya hits, knowing that he has so much will left over to be able to Judgment. He's at a position where he needs to try to start pushing, especially since Reiya is such a behemoth and he knows I'm going to be able to start, kind of clearing his board essentially. But he makes an interesting play here. So he does the flip with Frayla, who then lets to get him a Dark Elf from the grave, but he doesn't have one from the graveyard, which is really unfortunate. So he minimizes the value out of it. Then he's going to go ahead and give her Swiftness, which I'm like, okay, that's fine. Once again. And now he's at only 2 will, and the only thing he can do is to benefit from Frayla is to play Safina, or the Hilda from his hand, but the problem is he knows I have Endless Night, and also at the same time, if he swings, my Reiya can just kill his Frayla, so now he's kind of backed himself into a corner, and so that's what he does. He plays the Hilda, attempts to swing in with the Frayla to give the pump to the Hilda. I'll respond by casting Endless Night to kill the Hilda, which will also then kill the Shade Assassin because of the -2/-2, and then I can just block his Frayla with Reiya, who won't die because my 12/12 stat line, and then immediately kill it. So using just 1 card in my ruler, I 3-for-1'd him, which seems pretty suboptimal, and now he's tapped out with just a Final Battle that he can't possibly kill Reiya with, unless he spends almost all of his life, which is not good for him, and a Blood Spray, which is also going to hurt him. Now he could have still used Frayla here at the end of the turn to go ahead and pay the 3, go down to 2,000, and then kind of make the Safina on board bigger, and then bring the Hilda back to his hand. But it's a little suboptimal again. I'll play the Blood Spray during my turn to go ahead and try to kill the Safina and then draw some cards. And at that point, Paul's just like, yeah, you've got way more cards than me. There's no way I can answer the Hilda or the Reiya, and so we're going to go into game 2. So while it was a slow start for the Reiya Vampire list, it eventually did get there just by grinding out and, the strong 1-for-1s and the fact that Dark Elves were kind of putting in work for me, which is one of the problems with Dark Elves. As the game goes on, Dark Elves have to spend more and more of their life, so even if their opponent isn't being terribly aggressive, the Dark Elf list is still losing life, so they don't necessarily have to be, and they don't have nearly as long that they have to try to close out the game with. Again, I'm going second here. I played the Blood-Sucking, so I can't remember what his name is, but he's from Echoes of the New World. This card is strictly better as a 1-drop vampire than the one that we used to have that said, if your opponent has Special Magic Stone, put 2 +1/+1 counters on something. This guy just banishes to give +2 +1/+1 counters to anything, which I think is excellent. So he's naturally sticking on board, and it allows you to do some combat tricks, as well as being able to immediately turn on Reiya and be more naturally on curve, which I think is significantly better for this deck. He plays that Hilda, or Safina, on his turn to grab the Hilda out of his hand, which is a pretty common early move. So then if that Safina dies, the Hilda can bring it back. At that point, he just passes the turn because he can't swing with anything. I'll call for my stone, hit a Remains Vataraktya. I choose to pay the 300 life, go down to 37. And and then I play this Abdul, which is very helpful in the fact that, again, he has that Hilda. So I'll try and swing in with the Vampire. He'll go to block it. Now, it could be a trade, which might have been actually better for me to try to do. But instead, I just go, you know what, I'm going to make my Abdul an 8/8. Probably actually would have been better to just let the trade happen, especially knowing that I have the Abdul, so his Hilda becomes not able to do anything. You know, it just has to sit there, and again, he has to spend time, and I get a creature off board. 1-for-1s are important, and I essentially just went down a card for no reason. He'll play the Nyarlathotep, which unseals it, and then he can use the Crimson Sanction to kill the Abdul. Again, if I had just let the Safina get killed there, then he would have had to spend his entire turn playing the Nyarlathotep, which then in turn would have meant that I wouldn't have taken that damage from the Safina. Going to my turn, play the Rinka. I tap this pretty poorly here because I don't really think about the effect that Nyarlathotep has to be able to give stat pumps to things. I should have actually left it at two Waterstones up instead, and use my Energize for double black. Because now with his 4 stones, he's definitely going to be able to do battle manipulations with that Safina, and then just play the Hilda and bring it right back, which is really not good. So I'll go to try to block, to at least try to force him to make a play here. He chooses to then make it a 7/2 using Nyarlathotep's effect. I'm like, well, okay, that's fine. I'll let it resolve, and then I'll make it a, thinking about whether or not to make it a bear here. Again, I'm trying to get him to pay as much as possible for this kind of stuff. Unfortunately, either way, because he has so much will, my Rink is probably going to die. It's just a matter of how much I can get out of it. The other thing that I could have done here, which would have been probably pretty smart, is I could have, if I had 2 will up, I could have, in response to that, cast Charlotte's Water Transformation Magic on the Nyarlathotep, and then that resolves, and then after that, after the pumps resolve or damage resolves or anything, I then just Bear Magic the Safina, so it goes back to being a 4/4, and I kill it, and he can't pump it up anymore. All in all, I did some pretty poor misplays here in this sequencing, and it's going to cost me my Rinka, which is really, really not good. And then again, he loses that Safina, and then he can just play the Hilda and bring it right back. Instead, however, which I think is probably, he's thinking about playing maybe the Red Riding Hood, but he chooses instead to play the Hilda to bring back the Safina, which is the much better play. He has 3 creatures on board to my 0. I didn't run any final battles in this deck, just by choice. These would be things that are more in the sideboard. Probably should have thought about playing at least 2 of it in hindsight to be able to wipe the board. It just wasn't something that I was thinking of when I built the list, especially since the deck had so much removal in general. Do the Blood Spray to go down to kill the Nyarlathotep, so I don't have to deal with that again, and draw my 2 cards. You're going to see me kind of going like, wait a minute, I already called for stone this turn. I just wanted to get a mystery counter by tapping. So that mystery counter that I would have gotten from the stone is irrelevant. I haven't been playing with Flute's Water Dragon in this list too much. So I'm pretty far behind here. My life total is pretty low. Paul hasn't had to spend nearly as much life. He's got way more creatures on board than me. And I'm, low on will on his turn. So he can just kind of do whatever he wants. I'll go ahead and say, yeah, that's fine. You can kill the Flute's Water Dragon, which is unfortunate for me. Hits me with the Hilda, taking me down to 25. Plays a Red Riding Hood, hits me for 4, takes me down to 21. Plays a Red Riding Hood, hits me for 4, takes me down to 17. Calls a Stone, takes one of my cards away, and he goes down to 34 life. Plays another black, plays 2 black, plays an Abdul to lock down any kind of like bonus that I might get or enter effects, not that the deck has any. And then he plays Shade Assassin and pings me for another 2, taking me down to 15. So again, just with his creatures on board, he has lethal, easily. Just with Safina, there's really not much I can do here. But I go ahead and call for Stone, get that mystery counter. Vitality Drain would be excellent here to be able to like kill something and gain some life while also hitting him, but I also don't want to turn on his effect. Unfortunately, I don't have Vitality Drain in my hand here, so I'll go ahead and say, well, I'm going to play these 2 Rinkas. My thought would be they can serve as 2 blockers, and I can make some of his other guys smaller and reduce my damage. Not that it matters, because even at 4/4, there's just too many things on board for me to have to deal with. Calls for Stone, hits that Purgatory Stone. Again, it's red-black. Pays 1 and does Crimson Sanction on the 1 Rinka to just kill it out of the way, so it's no longer a threat. And then pays 4 and plays the Kame to steal my other Rinka. So easily just takes the game there. I could Charlotte's Water Transformation Magic that came in response so that he at least can't give it Swiftness or ping me the additional damage, but there's over 2,000 damage on the board just with the stuff that's already there. So we're going to go ahead and move on to game 3. So I'm going to be on the play for this one. Finally putting Dark Elves on the draw. Let's see what happens. Okay, that first turn Flute's Water Dragon, which is great, and say pass. His starts aren't necessarily very aggressive, so even tapping for Flute's Water Dragon on turn 1, tapping it for Stone on turn 2 is still pretty safe. Chooses to play the Red Riding Hood and then pass. So unfortunately no Death Touch or anything. Calling for Stone with the Flute, getting that mystery counter, going up to 2. Using Reiya to get a 3rd mystery counter. Putting out the Abdul to stop any kind of like Hilda plays on his turn 2. Swings into the Flute's Water Dragon, which I'm like, okay, that's fine. He's already at least got me 2 additional counters off mystery counters, which is great for me. And out comes, once again, his own. He thinks about playing his own Abdul. And then chooses to use his Energize instead to leave up that red source, which is probably pretty smart. I'll play a Flute's Water Dragon. The other reason why I didn't necessarily care about him killing the first one to into the Remains of Ataraktia, pay 3, get another mystery counter, go up to 4. I'll use Nameless Mist to look at his hand. Seeing that he has that Lightning Strike in his hand, I'm going to go ahead and take that. Main reason why is so that I can use my Abdul to kill his Red Riding Hood. And put a +1/+1 on my Abdul, so he can then, if he wants to try to block, he'll just lose the Abdul and I won't lose anything out of it. So bye-bye Red Riding Hood, and now I still have 1 blue stone up to make use of potentially a Sword of New Moon or Charlotte's Water Transformation Magic to help keep myself alive. Hits that Ebon home, goes down to 37, I lose an Endless Night, which is kind of unfortunate. Now he does have that final battle in his hand, and the problem is he would have to pay 14 life to kill the Abdul. Potentially at most he'd have to pay 10 life and completely tap out to kill it. So he'll go ahead and just use the Crimson Sanction on my Flute's Water Dragon just to get it off the board and save that final battle till maybe I have some more oppressive stuff. And he passes the turn there. Play the Nameless Mist. I'd like to look at his hand. I'm going to go ahead and say, well, let's deal with the final battle then, since it's the only thing I have there. Abdul will go up to being an 8/8. Paul's going to catch it here in a second because I don't catch it myself. Go up to 5 mystery counters. Now I have an 8/8 Abdul. Swing in for the 8. He goes ahead and takes the damage. Goes down to 29. Again, his hand is nothing but creatures, so at this point, I'm pretty set, which is excellent. Without any removal to really deal with the Abdul. His Safinas aren't very good, his Hildas aren't very good, and his Kame isn't very good. So, feels pretty good having now seen that hand with the Nameless Mist. He plays his own Nameless Mist, which I say okay to. He gets to either take... I can choose here to spend the Power Absorption, which probably actually would have been smart, but I choose not to. He decides to rip it out of my hand. Main reason was then he probably would have gotten my other -6/-6 spell, so I'm like, well, I'll let him take one of them at least, and then he can kind of try to deal with the rest. Plays that Safina. I'll draw for my turn. Before recovery, I'm going to go ahead and use the Sword of New Moon that I just top decked to deal with the Abdul, which is excellent. Could have saved it for the Kame, but Abdul's answering Kame right now just by existing, and again, he's now down to only 2 cards in hand, so I'm feeling pretty safe. I'll flip the Reiya, go up to 7 mystery counters, swing in for another 8, putting him down to 21, but he chooses to block with a Safina. 21 life is a really good place to put Dark Elves, because, like, then again, on their turn, during their turn, they're not high enough to have to be able to get the bonuses to their effects, unless they top deck a stone, which is not terribly too bad. He happened to top deck the Crimson Sanction, so now he can deal with the Abdul. Just barely, because it deals 800 damage. But again, if he tries to play a creature here, then Reiya can just kill it all by himself, all by herself, which is really good for me. Passes the turn after not really doing much else. I'll just go ahead and swing in for the 12 damage, taking him down to 17, and leave all my stones up. Paul's sitting pretty dry here with just Hilda and Abdul and Kame. Not much he can really do with the board state where it is. He can use the Safina to go grab a Hilda, which is honestly probably his best call. But with all my will open, he's maybe a little bit concerned and nervous about what he does if that kind of backfires on him. Or if I have removal in my hand to be able to deal with the stuff that he plays, and then I can just push him really hard with the Reiya. Might also be thinking about doing Judgment here. He actually does decide to do the Judgment, which I think is interesting. Gets a Dark Elf out of his grave. He gets the Safina, which lets him go grab a Hilda. This was actually pretty fine. I think that he... doing the Judgment there is not necessarily ideal. I mean, he can swing in for 10. Pretty safely, but the problem is then the crackback from Reiya is too intense. and he would lose almost everything if he decided to swing both of those into Reiya just to kill it. One, he knows I have Charlotte's Water Transformation magic, and two, so the swiftness that he tries to give something would be irrelevant, and two, he would, even if I let him have both of them, he would lose 2 creatures to only my 1, and again, he'd be in the same kind of bad position he was in. So I'm going to go ahead and make the Safina a bear at the end of his turn, remove 2 of my mystery counters, and then use Sword of the Half Moon, which will come back to my hands to then kill it. I'll draw for my turn. During the upkeep, I will use the Charlottes to make the Hilda a bear, and then I will recover. And then I will again use the Sword of the Half Moon and bring the card back to my hand to kill it. And then at this point I say pass, because I'm in a pretty stable position here. I can use Sword of Half Moon again. I can use Reiya if needed to either block his Frayla or to kill anything that he might play that's too big for sort of the new moon to deal with. Just lots of different options that I have here. Plays the Hilda, which will grab him a Safina from the graveyard. So, you know, he gets them back at least. Unfortunately, they're not really going to be able to do much. Pays 2 to play an Abdul. And then I believe says pass the turn here. Yeah, there we go. Pass the turn. He doesn't want to push in too hard. I'm thinking maybe I have another Charlotte or something else. At this point, I'm going to use Reiya to kill the Hilda. I'll go down to 2 counters, or I'll go down to 0 counters, burn them all by spending 2 on the Sword of the New Moon once again to kill the Abdul and bring the Sword of the New Moon back to my hand, or Half Moon back to my hand. Now at this point, I know he has Kame in hand. I don't know what the other card is. I do have that Rinka in my hand and access to a power absorption, I think, or a Sword of the Sword of the New Moon to be able to make it so that Rinka can kill something and get the +1. So I just go, oh yeah, I'm just going to play this Rinka. And then I start to play Nameless Mist, and I remember that he has the Kame in his hand. So I'm like, wait a minute, I just made a terrible mistake by playing this Rinka, because now I've given him something to be able to steal with the Kame. So I have to be able to now deal with that, which is no good. So what I do is I choose not to produce the will there, and use the Sword of the New for the Half Moon for a little trick you'll see here in a little bit to make sure I can deal with the Kame. Again, I'm trying to think of what puts me in the best situation board state wise. I just have Reiya. I need to try to force Paul to act. Maybe see if I can catch him in a slip or something of that nature, knowing that he's going to play the Kame. So I kind of want to just put him on a clock and see what he does, to get the most value out of what's going on here. Knowing that my life total is so high, I'm trying to kind of leverage that against him. I'm actually going to swing in the air at Paul for take him down to 5, and hoping that this works out for me. Draws this card for turn. Looks like it might be a... Can't quite tell what that card is. Place the Kame to try to attempt to steal my Rinka. And in response, I'm going to use Sword of the Half Moon on my own Rinka and kill it so that he can't steal it. Now this means if he wants to use Kame this turn, he has to sacrifice one of his own creatures. And at this point, there's no way, even if he swings everything at me, there's no way for him to do enough damage. So 10 damage if he swings at me with the Frayla, and if he wanted to swing into the Rinka, it would then kill the Frayla, and my Rinka would still be alive. He does give the pump to the Safina, but he swings at my face, so 2,700. Unfortunately, by doing that, however, now there's literally no way for him to kill me this turn. And especially right here where he chooses to swing at my face with the Safina, he actually just costs himself the game by swinging there instead of swinging at Reiya. So what happens here is I get pinged for 2 from the Kame trigger, and then I take the 11 damage, so 13 takes me down to 14. Now, Kame doesn't have swiftness, he doesn't have anything else, and Kame only deals damage to player, he doesn't deal damage to resonators or Jade Rulers with his pings. So now, if he wants Kame to be able to swing, he has to sacrifice Safina, pay red, and swing in for 10, and then he'll ping me for 2 more with Kame and leave me at 2. The problem is now Reiya can just crack back and fly over and deal the damage that I need. The other problem here is, though, because he swung Safina at me instead of at Reiya, Kame can't even trade with Reiya, so he has no way to kill it off the board, at which point then I can just draw, recover, untap, and swing in with Reiya and finish off the game, and Paul is just left dead in the water. That card in his hand is actually a Shade Assassin. If he had 1 more will, he actually would have been able to win the game here, so he could have played the Shade Assassin, and then swung in with that, and then sacrificed it to Kame, and then swung in with that and killed me. Unfortunately, he is just 1 will short because of when he flipped the Frayla, and it's just going to end up not working out for him. So he just has to make a decision of how he wants to kind of spend his last turn, making it as close as possible, or trying to set up a wall that doesn't matter, and then he'll have to end the game there. Because Shade Assassin unfortunately doesn't deal Death Touch to J-Rulers, he just has to only deal things to Resonators. So he sacrifices the Safina to take me down to 2, and then I draw, recover, untap, and then swing in. I'm going to go ahead and play the Castlevania just for fun to make it 14 damage, and then say the game is over. So that is it. Huge thanks to Paul for this match. Deck list will be up later this week. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Until next time, this is DMO73, signing off. Huge thanks to the patrons of the channel. You see their names on the screen here, some of them, and the rest are down below in the description for their support of the channel and the content. If you want to get a chance to get your name in the screen here and access to our private Discord server, please consider supporting the channel on Patreon by clicking that little P on the screen. Thanks so much. See you next time.